Welcome to today's culinary seminar, Delivering Flavor to Drive Sales. My name is Chef Nate Gonring, and I have the privilege of giving you a fresh perspective into our most relevant research findings applicable for menus of today. So let's get started. As you look at the agenda, we're going to talk about culinary trends in the research that we do for Gordon Food Service. We'll talk about umami, what is it, the benefits and types, the cheat codes to menu success, and then flavor trends. This was the 18th year we've conducted our proprietary external research in the three largest trend-driving cities in the US, which are New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. These cities incubate the ideas where trends start and influence chefs around the country. We seek out newly opened restaurants here because, in our experience, they're the ones that drive innovation amongst stiff competition. Let's look further at our process. The vast majority of the year, we carefully examine publications, digital newspapers, magazines, journals, and blogs that call out new restaurant openings. And this includes what you see here, Eater New York, LA, Chicago, Grub Street, New York Times, LA Times, Infatuation, just to name a few. We notate these restaurants and track their progress throughout the year. This becomes our target list. As we approach our annual research, we vet these targets out by visiting their websites, studying their menus, looking at their social pages, and reading what praises are out there. Last year, we had just south of 500 targets, and our goal is to select and visit 120 of them in a 3-week period. The logistics of all this is a ton of work with many obstacles. Our research is only as good as our preparation. As we finalize the list of locations that we plan to research, we have to look through the logistics. We map out the locations, factor in travel time, reservations, Uber rides, walking distance, and so on, to ensure our days are successful. In total, we average visiting 40 restaurants per city in just 5 working days. For 18 years, we've only gone to Manhattan and Brooklyn, as that is where the biggest draw is. We never really go north past Midtown because it's too touristy, and the vast majority of the new innovative restaurants are well below that mark. This past year, we visited 41 restaurants and tasted 441 dishes in just 5 days. Upon visiting these locations that you see here, we scan every menu, as the menus that are online don't always match what's available in person. We professionally photo each plate of food that we order, and we take a copious amount of notes after tasting each dish. Additionally, we talk to anyone and everyone that's willing to talk with us about their menu, their concept, and brand, for us to further understand their cuisine. The photos that are in this presentation are all from our research tours. In Chicago, we visited 39 restaurants and tasted 362 dishes. Our locations were a little further spread out than Manhattan, as you can see here. We visited some of the newest and most innovative restaurants in neighborhoods like Logan Square, The Loop, West Loop, South Loop, Wicker Park, Old Town, and so on. And here is our map of LA, where we tasted 384 dishes at 35 restaurants. By the ways of the cities in LA, like Beverly Hills, Hollywood, Santa Monica, Venice Beach, we uncovered more pieces to finish our last leg of research, totaling our restaurant count to 115, while tasting 1,187 dishes. After our research has concluded between all 3 cities, we take it back to our home office and try to decipher what it all means. We look for patterns between East Coast, West Coast, and in between, and every year we discover something that has not been on our radar. These are menu opportunities that we take a position on from a culinary perspective, and once we've highlighted our discoveries, we begin creating resources to complement our findings. Every year we standardize over 200 kitchen-tested recipes on our proprietary research, and it's housed in a proprietary web-based system for our sales and marketing teams to utilize in consulting with you, our customers, in commercial and non-commercial segments. Our research makes or breaks our entire year. What you see here is a brief look into our annual trends report, highlighting insights from our recent handhelds module. This image on the left shows the picture and context of the chicken fried hen of the wood sandwich from Bad Hunter in Chicago, and the image on the right is our recipe and plate presentation. This tool is designed to put our money where our mouth is. Pun fully intended, by the way. Umami is often referred to as a savory flavor or the 5th taste. This is an image of a tongue map, and it shows where our taste buds are stimulated by each category of flavor. What makes umami different from the other 4 categories is that umami affects our entire tongue and our taste sensories. When we taste foods that are rich in umami compounds, our tongues naturally start to salivate as umami coats our palate. This triggers a message to our brains that is received as a highly pleasurable taste. Since umami-based ingredients leave behind lingering flavors of sensation, it deposits a flavor memory in our minds. So what does that mean, and how do we use this to our advantage on our menus? As we go through examples, I want you to think about the benefits so you can see where these would make sense on your menus and in your operations. I think the most telling benefit is for healthcare, specifically for hospital patients and our senior communities, because foods that have umami-based ingredients increase overall consumption. This is due not only to receptivity to flavor, but also because it gets our palates to start salivating more and aids in the ability for digestion and chewing food. What I also think you will notice is that most of these ingredients are dry storage items, so you don't have to worry about the short shelf lives here. And let me explain in a little more detail about where you can find umami. There are 3 types of umami compounds, which are all amino acids. Amino acids, of course, are the building blocks of proteins. So it's no secret that a lot of umami-based ingredients are in fact derived from proteins. However, the amino acid glutamate is typically found in certain vegetables, both from land and sea. One of the most evolving macro trends that we have tracked through the course of the last 5 years has been vegetable centricity, where vegetables are the focal point of the dish. What we have seen through this lens is that chefs have been super specific in choosing their ingredients to influence craveability through umami ingredients, whether that is a complete vegetarian dish or a vegetable dish with a calculated amount of animal protein woven through it. Inositol is typically found in just proteins from land and sea, and guanylate is mainly occurring in mushrooms. Have I lost you yet? Well, maybe this will paint a better picture. For years, food scientists have been using umami-based ingredients in common household foods to drive craveability. Chips and snack foods are notorious for this. The above product on the left has all 3 of the umami properties found in its ingredient statement: glutamate, guanylate, and inositol. There's no wonder you can't just eat one chip. Food scientists have engineered these enhancements which contribute to the success of these products. Like most of you, I often look at ingredient statements when I'm out grocery shopping. The statement on the right is a prime example of a product where an ingredient has naturally occurring umami flavor. There is a calculated reason why there was kombu used to make minestrone soup. And as we start to see a faint light at the end of the tunnel for our restaurant industry, vaccines start slowly making their rounds, slowly but surely. It has finally allowed you, our restaurateurs and operations folks, the chance to think about your offensive playbook opposed to reacting to ongoing changes. Menu differentiation keeps the competitive edge and consumers intrigued for a taste of the unknown. So let's talk about trends and the cheat codes to flavor. The first category we'll look at is specific to the sea, with a lot of examples being sea vegetables. Nori, of course, is the seaweed most commonly found in your sushi roll, but is also very versatile beyond that. Kombu, or kelp, like we saw in the minestrone example, is typically used in stocks and primarily used in Japanese quick stocks called dashi, with the ingredient below, katsubushi, or bonito flakes. This is tuna that has been cured, smoked, and dried, then shaved into thin flakes. It's also commonly seen as a finishing garnish on today's dishes. Caviar has bursts of flavor, and we previously called out domestic caviars as something to look into as the quality is high, they are accessible, and not nearly as expensive as the imported versions. Nabashi is dried anchovies or sardines used for stocks and broths. Togarashi is now a common seasoning blend that's comprised of chili flakes, tuxedo sesame seeds, ginger, garlic, citrus, and seaweed. Furikake is a Japanese seasoning that is now becoming mainstream enough that even Trader Joe's has it in their brand. It is popular because of the natural umami in it, imparted by the seaweed or nori. There are many versions of furikake found today, but they all at minimum have the seaweed component in it, and even though some of the blends will incorporate dried fish or shellfish flakes, most of what is found in the marketplace is vegan. Wakame is another sea vegetable and typically used in soups or in cold salads. Batarga is your dried cured mullet roe that is used as a finishing season and often zested with a microplane. Neonata is an Italian condiment of spicy Calabrian chilies and anchovies and is great on pizza. Anchovies and other tinned seafood or conservas have really become popular in the last year. Now let's look at some of the examples from research. This is restaurant Cowie in New York City in the Hudson Yards development, Chef David Chang's newest restaurant, and this is a spicy roasted rice cake dish. And although we called out rice cakes as a trend, what we're looking at here are the highlighted items of the ingredients, the chili jam, the Benton's ham, and the furikake that we just talked about. The chili jam, of course, is made with gochujang, which is a Korean chili paste. It is fermented and has tons of umami property in it. The Benton's ham is another call out here because it is a dry cured ham. It is not wet brined like you would get at the deli and sliced. Because it's dry cured, its flavor is condensed, very similar to like a prosciutto would be. So just a thin sheet of that across the top of this rice cake really makes a dramatic difference. Furikake, of course, we had talked about, so we'll go to the next example. At restaurant Black Ship in Los Angeles, this dish of momotaro tomatoes, what really accentuates this dish is the nori oil that's drizzled over the top. Again, it's just blending that seaweed and oil in a blender and using that as a garnish to add some additional flavor to the whipped ricotta. Whipped ricotta is something that we actually put as a demo. So when you're on the show site, go find the whipped ricotta recipe and take a look. We've got the recipe in the system as well as an additional resource. And then at the Fulton in New York City, this is their salad of chicories. And here they're using seaweed in their vinaigrette. Again, another simple blender work element for them just to add in to the blender with their vinegar, turning it up, buzzing it. And here it's used as a dressing with their chicories and citrus segments. At Hanyeyo in New York City, this is their clever dish of dumplings. Again, here's some more rice cakes coming into the fold, but they're using beef broth. It's a natural umami liquid flavor bomb. And then they have nori again as a textural element on top that's crispy, but adding that extra umami impartment there that you can just stir right in and add that to the soup. Also at Hanyeyo, here's another dish that they're using for the bibimbap. They've got some cod roe on top there that's dolloped, some salmon roll. And then if you look on the left, they also have a little bit of nori that's julienne for you to kind of stir in with these compartmentalized ingredients. At restaurant Proxy in Chicago, this is their fried breakfast radish dish. And what you see on the left-hand side is some really nice nori butter that's used as kind of a sauce component for these warm radishes that have just been gently fried. And then at Yours Truly in Los Angeles, this is their Parker House Rolls dish. And here they're using the seaweed as part of their butter component again here. They've got a really nice quenelle off to the side of the Parker House Rolls, so just pull that apart and use that to spread right on top of your roll. And then back at Hanyeyo, here they're using a little bit of salmon roe as a dollop on top of their bouillabaisse. And then they have some grilled bread in the back that also has more seaweed butter on top. Really easy way to incorporate that as an ingredient. At Restaurant Pacifique in Los Angeles, here's their scallop skewer dish. And what you're seeing here that's highlighted is the Togarashi seasoning. So just taking that scallop out off the skewer and then dipping it right in the Togarashi seasoning, just imparting that additional layer of flavor to really accentuate that scallop with the seaweed. And then also at Pacifique, this is their embered sweet corn, and here Togarashi makes a play again. And Parmesan cheese, also no stranger to umami, but we'll talk about that further in a different category. At Orden Broadway in Los Angeles, this is their Shogun Assassin dish. So here you see their wings, but they are rubbed in Togarashi. So very simple way to execute something at a bar and grill by adding this as a seasoning profile and putting it right in your wings. Back at Black Ship in LA, the radicchio salad is using furikake as an ingredient in their salad here with butternut squash vinaigrette. Very easy way to contribute that, and also another textural component. And then also, here's a different take of another seaweed. This is Hajiki seaweed. So a little bit of a texture difference here that they're using that you can kind of chew through with the maitake mushrooms. And it's something that adds a little bit more depth of flavor to this dish. Back at Hanyeyo, here they're adding wakame as a kind of softer seaweed element to add through this dish as it's simmered with the soy and garlic. And the sable fish really goes along, again, with that oceanic flavor, that salinity flavor that's really partly from that wakame. At Hunky Dory in Brooklyn, this is their vegetable broth. And as we have talked about through the years of bone broth is becoming really, really popular, a lot of places are calling their vegetable broths bone broths as more of a play on words, but here they're using really umami-rich ingredients that are vegan. So the alternatives like mushrooms and kombu, which we had talked about earlier, being that dried kelp is used as a broth. And here it's making that really nice dark color, and it has loads of flavor. At Racine's in New York City, and this is their chilled leek dish. And here are the flavor components that they're using to really kind of drive through this dish. The white soy sauce, or something that's brewed, fermented. And then dashi, we talked about that briefly in the beginning of this category, being that's made with the kombu and katsuobushi to make this broth, which is just gently simmered and then kind of garnished or just put lightly on this dish to accentuate the leeks. And then back at Pacifique in LA, they're blistered shishito peppers. So squid ink being put into this aioli to make really black aioli has a lot of flavor profile in it, and a little bit goes a long way. Just a dot like dye would be can really spark flavor throughout this dish and in this aioli. At Canal Street Oyster Bar in New York City, their tartare dish of Spanish mackerels. Their Squid Ink Chips are really, really cool. So these are rice chips. They're taking cooked rice, putting it into a blender, pureeing it, and dehydrating, and then making these wonderful fried chips of squid ink. Again, a little bit goes a long way here, but the umami comes through on the chips, and they're a really, really cool color of black. Really awesome for this tartare dish. And then at yours truly, the carbonara dish that they have here is just loaded with umami flavors. They've got the squid ink in their pasta. They've got uni and trout roe, and then that Batarga makes a presence at the end just to finish off the dish and shaved with a microplane. At Savita in New York City, their terra masalata, which is made of dry cured cod roe, is blended with a little bit of olive oil and potatoes and becomes a really nice shared plate or a shareable with crusty bread or serving on a side. And it's finished with tobiko, so some more caviar on top. And then back at Racine's, here's another example where some roe or caviar comes into play. So here's their dish of lentils with creme fraiche, almost like a salad. And they've got a little bit of bay leaf in there to help with that kind of seaweed presence. And that pop of the trout roe at the end has a burst of salinity and umami and a really bright texture as well. At Tartine in Los Angeles, here's some more trout roe coming into play. So they've got coddled eggs here. They've got some grilled bread on the side with za'atar, but the roe really cuts through some of that richness of the egg and also adds another textural component to it. At Intersect in New York City, here they're adding a little bit of trout roe on top again, but they're adding fish gravinis or fish cracklins, so using that skin here to accentuate the dish, add a textural layer, and also use the whole fish in general for the purpose of this dish. And then Pomp and Circumstances in Brooklyn, this is their smoked trout roe dip. So again, more trout roe coming into the fold. And then they have a little bit of chives on top of there for an allium note, really nice finish. At Cathedral in New York City, Kaluga caviar makes a presence here with some creme fraiche and potato chips for dipping. Really, really nice finish. At Restaurant Cowie, again, David Chang's restaurant in New York City, his Cowie Bop. They've got candied anchovies that are in the sushi roll that really make just a really unique flavor and texture inside. And then, of course, you've got the nori roll on the outside, so that seaweed presence there. You've got uni in the back, and then trout roe as well. So just tons of umami ingredients. And again, these are all those calculated decisions that chefs are putting on menus to really make them stand out and drive that craveability. And then at Jungle Bird in New York City, here they have a simple plate of hummus. But what's cool is that they're using these shrimp chips. So it's dried shrimp that's mashed into a paste and then fried, and they kind of puff up like cracklins would be. But here they're using that as the chip component to use for the hummus with some crudité as well. And then Ordon Broadway, here's another example of just the prawn crackers on the side, a nice visual here. So the shrimp and rice chicharrones. And at restaurant Chismis in New York City, this is that Filipino restaurant. This was our favorite kind of Caesar rendition of last past year. Looks like a traditional Caesar, but what they're adding on top are these tuyo flakes. And Caesars, of course, are known to be highly craveable because of the anchovy that's in the actual Caesar dressing. And here they're replacing it with more of a Filipino ingredient, being that tuyo, so that marinated spicy herring that's crisped up and used as a textural component on top. And it's something to really drive that craveability and also that mouthfeel as well. Back at Pompum Circumstances, Batarga onion dip. So you're doing something whimsical like onion dip, adding that mullet roe on top that's dried and cured and then shaved and planed on top with that zester. Adds a pop of color and also salinity and lots of umami to finish as you dip through that onion dip. Back at the Fulton, they're taking hopper shrimp, they're frying it, but they're finishing the dish with Batarga and that lemon wedge on the side, really kind of unifying this dish together. At the Jungle Room in New York City, I really love this dish because avocados are always something that sells, right? But they're taking a whole avocado, they're splitting it in half, and they're grilling the avocados, which also helps from making it oxidize. But they're putting a little bit of ponzu dressing in the center of these avocados to serve as kind of a sauce component. And ponzu is a combination of soy sauce that's been marinated with citrus and also katsuobushi or bonito flakes, and just left to sit through the course of an evening in refrigeration, and then strained out. And you get this wonderful liquid that has tons and loads of flavor that they're using as more or less the sauce component of this dish. So scooping out that warm avocado, getting that ponzu in there, really delicious. And then back at Jungle Bird in New York, this is their yuca fried dish. So here you've got kimchi, which is another category that we're gonna talk about a little bit later, but the bonito flakes or katsuobushi on top is really what is a finishing ingredient here that adds that kind of oceanic flavor, also supplements adding a little bit of texture on top. And if you're familiar with katsuobushi or bonito flakes, when they're added to something hot as a garnish like this on the yuca fries, when they come to the table, they actually move around, they dance because the proteins restrict and they move. So something that's a dry staple pantry ingredient actually kind of comes to life when you serve it warm as a garnish like this. It's really cool to see. And at the Royal Grocer in Chicago, this is one of my favorite dishes from ways back, but this is the radish pasta. So they're taking radishes, they're sheeting them out and then turning them into almost like fettuccine kind of noodles, and they're cooking them inside of a dashi broth. So cooking it like a pasta method, but they're cooking it in the dashi that we've talked about earlier, and then serving it in an uni butter and then topping it with trout roe. So it's like umami 3 different ways, just loads and loads of flavors, but the vegetable is the star focused. And then it's being accentuated with all these wonderful ingredients. Back at Racine's, this veg-centric dish here are Brussels sprouts, just really delicious. The XO sauce and sunchoke granola really make this. So XO is a sauce that has a little bit of usually ham scraps. We talked about Benton's ham earlier and dried cured hams. Well, it's got a little bit of that in there, but it's got dried scallop and dried shrimp pieces. And that together is this dry condiment or pantry staple that's typical in Chinese cuisine and cooking. But they're using this to just toss in the Brussels sprouts. So as they caramelize, all these flavors really soak in and absorb in the Brussels sprouts, and then finish with this wonderful textural component of sunchoke granola. And then at Ord and Broadway, here's XO sauce again. They're using it for their lumpia. And here they have the shrimp and the chicken in the lumpia. This is the XO sauce and cured egg yolk umami component that's there. And then for dipping, they have a sweet chili sauce. On to the next category of fermentation. So what you see here are the vast majority are all dry pantry ingredients. Your fish sauce, your oyster sauce, soy sauce. A lot of these have high salinity levels in them, but as I've told people in the past, if you use them just really small quantities, you don't need to use kosher salt. So if you're worried about salt maybe on your menu, maybe if you're in healthcare, if you use a little bit of fish sauce, just a dash, it will give you the salt that you need without having to use loads of kosher salt or iodized salt, and give you so much flavor and complexity in your dish just with a small drip. Oyster sauce, of course, is made with oysters. Your soy sauce is brewed in fermented soybeans. Miso paste is a paste of fermented soybeans. And then kimchi is super wonderful. Cabbage in itself has natural umami flavor, but when it's fermented, it is condensed down and is made into this really spicy, flavorful component or side dish. Black garlic is something that's been on the scene for a while now. It's been very popular. So fermenting garlic until it turns black. And we've seen that anything from seasoning profiles to Alfredos to whatever you name it, it makes its way into anything where garlic could be and replacing it with this fermented version. And liquid aminos is something that, a lot of people that can't have soy sauce, if they have an allergy to that, liquid aminos will replace that a lot of the time. So some of the examples, hunky dory, a side salad here, but what they have called out specifically for their vinaigrette is the inclusion of fish sauce. So this wonderful, simple salad here, but really makes it and drives the flavor is the vinaigrette and the fish sauce together. And back at yours truly in Los Angeles, this parsnip dish was just amazing. So they take whole parsnips, they roast it in XO sauce. They've got the medjool date puree down at the bottom, some finger limes for texture, and then that Korean chives. But the XO sauce is really what makes this entirety of this dish. The parsnips by themselves do not have the complexity of flavor that you would get standing alone. It's the XO sauce on top here and woven throughout when it's roasted that really makes it stand out. Back at Black Ship, so here they're using tamari, which is kind of your replacement or gluten-free soy sauce that's being the glaze for the meatballs with this polenta. But again, soy sauce is something that is a simple component, that's a simple pantry ingredient that you can utilize to your advantage to add that flavor and replace it with something else. So you can really harness these dishes to make it as best you can. Also a Black Ship, this is their umami soy sauce. Here they're even calling it out, right? So they have soy that's in there and other components. They've got oyster sauce that's in there, and now they're taking their egg yolks and they're putting it inside this wonderful arancini. And as you fry it, the egg yolk is still runny and the rice enrobes it in the outside. So you take that squeeze bottle that they have in the back of that umami soy sauce, squeeze it right into the center of that and take it as a 1 or 2 bite dish. Really, really delicious. At Pacifique in Los Angeles, their spicy cucumber dish. So gochujang, one of those fermented condiments, a Korean staple, typically found in kind of Korean barbecue. The base of it is soybeans that's been fermented. Here they have that with cucamelon, some pickled onions, and fried shallots. But, cucumbers by itself would not have those flavors again without adding that gochujang to it. And gochujang has become wildly popular. Now it's super mainstream. I think Shake Shack just rolled out a fried chicken sandwich with gochujang just a couple weeks ago. So that is, something that's been around for a minute if you're not familiar. And here they're doing lamb shoulder skewers with gochujang. So adding that ingredient again, you see that more of that barbecue element where they're putting this on a grill, grilling it with that gochujang, making it more of a traditional barbecue Korean component, and finishing it with some scallions on top. At Most Valuable Playa in Los Angeles, here they're doing their kind of Vietnamese fried chicken. And here the nuoc mam or fish sauce comes into play. So they're adding that, kind of glazing those chicken wings. So really easy way to incorporate another pantry staple into a mainstream dish being wings. And then they're adding Parmesan cheese at the end and letting that crisp up with those wings to get crispy and crunchy. So you've got almost that, textural component from the chicken skin and then also the Parmesan cheese as well. Also Pacifique, again, they've got chicken thigh skewers. Yuzu kosho is a fermented paste of chilies and citrus, and that fermentation process really makes it so flavorful, and using that as a marinade or a component to finish this chicken skewer dish is really what makes it exciting. At Makani in Los Angeles, their purple cabbage dish. So again, I said purple cabbage. Cabbage in general will always have some natural umami, but the way they cook it and they roast it really accentuates those flavors, brings them out alive. And then they add fish sauce to it to make it more complex, to really kind of make it more flavorful and play in those umami flavors. And they did a really nice job with that. At Mason Yaki in New York City, this is their bread service. So just a side of their wonderful baguettes that they have. And then yuzu koshu comes into play as a compound butter. So here they're whipping it up, putting that as a side. So really simple bread treatment to have and make that bread service so much more memorable. At yours truly, I love this vegetable dish. So this is their cauliflower popcorn, and they're doing it in such a fashion that when you see it at the table, obviously it kind of jumps out at you. It looks almost like popcorn for a quick second, but the tempura, making it different shapes and sizes, and then what they're adding on top is that shaved Parmesan cheese from a zester, so it looks kind of fluffy and light and cloud-like. Really what makes it look like popcorn. But what they're adding for the flavors, though, is that yuzu kosho comes into play. Your beniacata, so your anchovy dressing comes into play there, and then a little bit of citrus at the end to kind of marry it all together. Back at Masonyaki, this is what they're calling their French breakfast. So they've got French radishes and then umbashi butter. So this is fermented plums that comes into play into this butter. So another compound butter sauce that comes in and really accentuates these radishes and makes them stand out. At Jungle Bird in New York, here fish sauce again, something simple, pantry ingredient comes into play. Fish sauce being fermented, and so they're adding this as more of that condiment staple here that you see that clear kind of dipping sauce on the side. So it's typically made with vinegar or lime juice and a little bit of sugar that's simmered together, and is used as that sweet and sour component, and the fish sauce being that salt piece that's part of that dressing or sauce on the side for this to kind of come all together and become one. And then at Jungle Bird, rice cakes we talked about earlier, but it's the gochujang chili paste that glazes these rice cakes that really makes them kind of sweet and sticky and spicy at the same time, adding complexity to this dish and making it really craveable at the same time. Back at Hanyeo, kimchi, right? So the fermented cabbage coming into the pancakes here. That ingredient, yes, it is Korean. Hanyeo is a Korean restaurant, but that is, again, a way to cross-utilize their ingredients on the menu being kimchi at a Korean restaurant, but also driving all that flavor in something as simple as pancakes. And then at Hanyeo, this is just their side components, and you see their wonderful kimchi for its face value there. And they've got anchovies in the back that's actually fried, so that's something you would add as a component for a textural stir-in if you'd like to. And just, another couple of different sets of umami components here. And then at Peach Mart in Hudson Yard, this is one of David Chang's restaurants, their chicken katsu sando. Here you've got cabbage. Kewpie mayo, of course, is your Japanese-style mayonnaise that's known for the umami that's in there. The bulldog sauce is very similar to teriyaki sauce, and so it's got tomato paste and soy sauce and other ingredients that really drives that umami kind of innovation behind it. And all together, and this wonderful milk bread makes a wonderful katsu sando. Back at Masonyaki, so another kind of sando dish here. They're doing a beef tongue sando, but the tenkatsu sauce that we just talked about, here it makes an addition, again, on top is a finishing sauce component. At Peach Mart, here's another sando that they're doing, a cold sando. So the Kewpie mayo is part of the dressing for this egg salad that's tossed together. So it's being really specific. You could use regular mayonnaise, but the Kewpie mayonnaise is going to have tons more of umami, so you might as well use that, right? And then back at Masonyaki, this is their okonomiyaki, made with cauliflower. So they're doing a wonderful vegetable pancake of okonomiyaki. Their bulldog sauce, which is typically another name for tonkatsu sauce, and then Kewpie mayo, again, comes into the fold here. At the Jungle Room in New York City, this is another wonderful veg-centric dish. So this is more of a shareable. This is a whole pot-roasted cauliflower dish, and what's on the outside isn't charred. It is actually the black mole that's been glazed on top. So it's made with that black garlic, so that fermented garlic, and just has loads of flavor. As we know, mole is super complex in the first place, but adding that black garlic on top for that kind of glaze or schlacking over the cauliflower just makes it highly delicious. And then at Beatnik in Chicago, this is their charred broccolini dish. So the nuoc chum or fish sauce comes into play here. So a super wonderful veg-centric dish. They've got sunflower hummus down on the bottom, pomegranate seeds, and puffed rice for texture. Just a really elegant way to kind of class up this broccolini dish. At Somerset in Chicago, here black garlic comes into the fold again. So they're using that as part of the kind of dressing with the yogurt that's in this dish. They've got two different types of textural components with the almonds and then chicken skins. So fried chicken skins that have been crisped up and then put on top for a garnish and texture. And that's something that we'll talk about in more of the protein side of unique flavors of umami building at a different category. And here's another dish of Chinese broccoli. So you've got fermented black beans here that they're calling out on the menu. Again, this is another calculated reason why Clever Rabbit, they are trying to use these ingredients to pull through and take something that wouldn't have those flavor profiles and dressing them up and making them super craveable. And at the Jungle Room, the Oaxacan truffle quesadilla. If you're not familiar with hoite leche, that is your corn fungus or fermented corn. And it is very akin to the flavor of truffle. So here they're using a native Hispanic ingredient, putting that into the quesadilla and really having this wonderful, depth of flavor that you would normally not get in a quesadilla treatment. And just a really, really clever way to do that. At Onda in Los Angeles, this is their Koji marinated sweet potato. So Koji, of course, is rice culture that is fermented, that makes natural kind of umami. So they're using that for the sweet potato, which I think is super unique. And Koji, you might see in more mainstream applications for quick dry curing of steaks and also using to make things like miso, so your fermented soybeans that we talked about earlier. On to mushrooms. And it's, I guess, no secret that mushrooms often find their way into vegetarian cuisine, right? Because in a way, texturally, they taste like meat, protein, right? But also because they have wonderful flavor profiles and depths of umami. And you kind of see this on this chart here on the right-hand side. Dried shiitake mushrooms versus fresh. One of the things that you'll find about umami-based cuisines is that if you have a dried product, they have way more flavor because they're intensified during the drying process. A very simple way to think through that is with sun-dried tomatoes. If you eat a regular tomato, it has some umami to it on its own, one of the few kind of, fruits, if you will, that does. But if you sun-dry it, it condenses down and fortifies. That's why I think you could almost eat sun-dried tomatoes out of the bag because they're sweet and delicious and they have tons of flavor. The same is true with the complexity of dried mushrooms. So when you can use them to your advantage in places like seasonings, oftentimes you'll find them in vegetable burgers. So veggie burgers, plant-based burgers, you'll see them on the ingredient statement. They're oftentimes utilized to drive through that flavor profile as a meat replacement. So I encourage you to work through that on your menu. Look at mushrooms differently, more or less, than just a textural component to replace proteins. Look at it as accentuating different dishes by using them as an ingredient. So here at Pacifique, here they have their maitake mushrooms, and very simply done with yuzu butter and sake. But those mushrooms in itself, they have that characteristic, that craveability factor. At Brody G's, they're King Trumpet mushrooms here, and they're using Parmesan cheese. And Parmesan cheese, we'll talk about cheese in a different category, but it has so much umami profile. It has one of the highest amounts of umami in it. Next to, I think, Gruyere cheese or Emmentaler cheese. And we'll get through that in a minute. But here they're using it cleverly because they're putting umami on umami, which really drives through. It could be a different type of cheese, and they do it so well. Also at Birdie G's, here they're doing a mushroom relish on top of their polenta. So they're repurposing mushrooms, which I think is clever, right? So they're remenuing it to incorporate in other ways, cross-utilizing ingredients here. But it's clever and it works and has that flavor that we're looking for. At Missy in Brooklyn, so Chef Missy Robbins, here she's got her chanterelle dish, right? So something simple, but still delicious at the same time. Simple ingredients with rosemary and garlic, lemon to finish, just delicious. And here's her tagliatelle, and she's using matsutake mushrooms here and Parmesan cheese. So again, mushrooms and Parmesan work so well. At Electric Lemon and the Hudson Yards development in New York, this is their warm grain porridge. So maitake mushrooms comes into the fold here. That yolk, so eggs do have some umami to it. So that soft cooked egg and that runny yolk really makes a difference to stir that in. But they're using that to really enhance what is really a healthy dish here. If you look at the grain mix on here, so millet and corn, they've got wheat, flax, seeds, chia. all this wonderful, this porridge ingredients on here, just super delicious, but still super healthy. But they're adding the flavor components with those mushrooms and that yolk to really give it more flavor than otherwise it wouldn't have. Back at Pompum Circumstances in Brooklyn, here dashi comes into play. So they're making mushroom dashi. They're adding those dried mushrooms to it, this broth, to really accentuate the Arctic char. And the Arctic char is cured here, another good way to preserve that seafood and add more flavor to it. Wonderful dish with a lot of components. At Somerset in Chicago, grilled maitake mushrooms. But what did they put on it? They put miso, your fermented soybeans. So here's another friend, right? Adding that to the fold this is a pure vegetable dish, and this is vegan in its own self, right? So mushrooms and miso. They're adding watercress for a garnish and some vibrancy there, and sunflower seeds for texture, but it's speaking for itself, which I appreciate. And then at Heritage Restaurant and Caviar Bar in Chicago, this is their vegetable dish of ramen. So they've got doenjang, so it's more of a cousin to gochujang in Korean treatment. So another fermented paste that's there. Yellow miso, fermented soybeans, wild mushrooms, and kimchi. So they're taking pretty much all they can harness from an umami perspective for a vegetarian dish and putting it all together as you see fit here. And it works. Has tons of craveability, and they're adding, you got your radishes in the back there that are so wonderful and beautiful. But this is a great vegetarian dish. And these sort of dishes can get higher profit margins, right? Less cost to you. On to a different category of bacteria and yeast. So cheeses. So Parmesan cheese that we just talked about. I mean, if you look at the scale there of how many milligrams per 100 grams of glutamate is in there, it is off the charts. And you see tomatoes on the right-hand side. There is a reason why people love red sauce and Parmesan cheese. And it's not because when you were a kid you ate that, it's because of the connection and that marriage of umami-based ingredients. And if you don't know it, now you know. There's a reason why you crave red sauce. I crave red sauce all the time, and I always finish it with Parmesan cheese. And if you have it, Parmesan Reggiano, best. So Emmentaler cheese, we talked about that earlier. You kind of see these differentiators here of these cheeses that really work to drive your menu. So cheddar cheese is one of those things. So if you have to pick and choose between cheeses on your menu or what you're going to insert, pick the ones that work, that have the most flavor if you can. If that works in your development, if you can cross-utilize those ingredients, use it where you can. And interestingly enough, matcha has umami in it, if you didn't know. And nutritional yeast is something that I think is super popular these days as kind of a vegan cheese ingredient. So a lot of people will put that on top of popcorn to kind of mimic what cheese would taste like, but will also find its way into a lot of ingredient statements that are veggie burgers or plant-based burgers, because if they're soy-based or whatever they might be, they don't have that natural umami in them. It's that nutritional yeast component that will carry it through and give them way more flavor than it would have otherwise. So let's look at some examples here. This is back at Mason Yaki in New York City. This is their profiterole, so a French version. This restaurant in itself is a French-Japanese mashup restaurant. So here you see them take profiteroles, which is a French pastry. This is a dessert. And they're using a matcha creme anglaise as the sauce. So they're combining their French and their Japanese kind of ingredients here. And again, that matcha does have some umami to it. At Winsome Bakery in Brooklyn, man, these breakfast sandwiches were just insane. One of the things I talked about, right? So different segments, different day parts. Well, breakfast doesn't matter. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, all these ingredients you can weave throughout the course of the menu through all your different day parts. So this is their milk bun zhujiao. And here they're using raclette cheese. And raclette cheese is one of those cheeses that has tons of flavor and tons of umami built into it. It's kind of got that barnyardy smell to it. Typically, if you smell that in cheese, it's going to have tons of flavor. And putting that melted in between their milk bun here and putting it for a breakfast sandwich makes the difference in the world. It really just makes it so craveable. And it's these sort of ingredients that really make a difference that you want to put in your menu for success. Back at Missy in Brooklyn, this is just a shaved dish of fennel, but adding that Parmesan Reggiano again to finish those shavings of it really bring through, that umami presence. So again, when we talked about Caesar salads before with anchovies coming through the fold, right, with the dressing, Caesar salads and Parmesan cheese always go hand in hand. There's a reason for that. It is that natural flavor that's in these ingredients that really drive home the flavor. The Jones in New York City, this is their chopped steak. And here, raclette cheese is melted over the chopped steak, right? So picking and choosing which cheeses you want to use, raclette is one of those that will really help your menu and drive craveability. The Jones, we've been talking about Parmesan Reggiano as a finishing ingredient. I mean, these clouds of Parmesan Reggiano, I mean, this is not even an ounce to finish this. I guarantee you it's probably a fourth of an ounce, 7 grams maybe. But finishing it with a microplane zester adds height. So it gives you that kind of elegance and class, minimal cost, tons of flavor. And here they're finishing their gem lettuce salad with that. Eaten in Chicago, here they're calling it umami donuts. So they've got roasted mushrooms in miso and warm raclette cheese on the side for dipping. I mean, it speaks for itself, right? The umami donut, they're calling it out themselves, and they're using these ingredients for purpose and for a reason, and they have great success. On to proteins. So we've kind of talked about some of these as supplementing ingredients in other dishes, but what you're going to find here are fermented and dry cured sausages like lapchung, which is a Chinese sausage, andouille, which is something we've talked about and for the last couple of years, which is your Calabrian kind of salumi style spread that's spicy and fermented. And then you've got cured ham, so your country style hams. In the US, we've got a lot of really good local ham producers in the South that do really good cured domestic hams, which are very similar to like a prosciutto would be. And then something like dry aged beef. So if you dry age a steak, it fortifies and condenses down into this flavor that would not be the same if it was just right out of the package, right? So that's another thing to consider. And like I said before with the cured hams, prosciutto di Parma, those two things in general are gonna have really, really good results. And you see some of the metrics here on the right-hand side between those amino acids. Some examples, Ordon Broadway. Roasted bone marrow. We talked about this maybe a year ago or so, but bone marrow was an ingredient that kind of snuck up on us and was used not just as out of the canoe or the bone here, but it's woven its way into menus and compound butters and sauces and stir-ins and things of that nature. But it's really something that can be on its own, but it is an accentuating ingredient as well to finish dishes. Here they're using it is, in the canoe format, and then they have oxtail adobo that's been shredded and put on top of the bone marrow. So it's something you spoon out and put on top of the bread that's there in the back. Back at Birdie G's, so the cracklins that you see here, right? So you've got chicharrones and sauerkraut being fermented cabbage. So those two coming together, really making this dish with loads of flavor. Back at Birdie G's again, andouille makes its presence known. So here in the salad component, so adding just small little pieces of andouille into this salad like it would be any other meat protein. You've got a little bit of ham in here that's dry cured as well. Jardinera with some of that spicy component and pecorino cheese. But those components play so well together, and the andouille really drives through this kind of chopped salad that we're used to having, salami or whatever else might be. And then at Windrose in New York City, this is their Taiyok Mac and Cheese, if you will. So Taiyok is the rice cakes that we've talked about previously, and they're doing a wonderful play on mac and cheese. But the pork rind crumble on the top is that umami component, that flavorful component that for one is a texture, but also adding that protein inclusion to really stir into this dish and make it so much different. And at Restaurant Margot in Los Angeles, here they're adding Serrano Ham Cracklin. So Serrano ham, dry cured ham. They're just dropping it in the fryer and really crisping it up to make it texturally different and adding that as a finishing a style component or garnish on top of the market lettuce as you see here. Most valuable player in LA, lapchung sausage. We talked about that as a dry cured or fermented sausage. It's a Chinese staple. But just slicing that as is, crisping it up and putting it into this bowl format here has tons and tons of flavor. Don Angie in New York City, this is their lasagna. And their bolognese that they're making here has some specific dry cured Italian sausage in it. And then the pancetta as well. So pancetta, of course, being your cured pork belly that's not smoked to be bacon, but it's just dry cured. But the dry curing process is what fortifies it, gives it all that flavor profile, and makes it, craveable when you crisp it up in a pan and put it into dishes like they're doing here in their lasagna. Back at Winsun, their pork floss, which is kind of like, what I'd say is kind of like your jerky chew you get at the gas station, but they're doing that with pork and all the flavors of Asian ingredients, your gingers, your soy, and cooking that down into this shredded texture. And here they're putting it into basically a rolled format of rice on the outside. And this is something they're doing for breakfast that is just highly, highly addicting. Back at Don Angie, their Ville de Pepe. So Speck makes itself known here. So Speck, of course, is your Italian smoked prosciutto. And, here they're just taking a thin layer of that, putting that over their pan-fried veal kind of schnitzel, and then adding all these wonderful ingredients on top to accentuate it with pickled mustard seeds and fresh horseradish and so on. But when you cut through it and you get some of that speck flavor, it really makes a difference, and there's not much of it on the plate. A thin sheet of speck. Popham Circumstances, dry-aged lamb meatballs. We talked about dry-aged products, so taking something as simple as a ground dry-aged product, turning into a meatball format, has way more craveability in there than it would be if it wasn't dry cured, right? And the ribeye fat that they're using, which they're cross-utilizing their ingredients here, and that actually has tons of flavor too. So using animal fats to your advantage, so if you're cooking with bacon fat or whatever it might be, that's really gonna help dishes as well. So keep thoughts on that. Also, Popham Circumstances, their arugula salad here, they've got a lot going on. They've got cured pork jowl lardons, so cured pork jowl like bacon would be, Parmesan Reggiano, and an anchovy vinaigrette, right? There's a reason why they're using all these things, because it's super addicting and it's an awesome salad, and you take these away and the salad is not the same. Back at Winsun, their turnip cakes, this is like a play on a hash brown that you get like at McDonald's, for example, but they're using Benton's ham, their dry cured ham. And then they're using a dried shrimp chili vinaigrette, which is really an XO sauce that we talked about earlier. And that's got some fermented black vinegar in there. So all these flavors that are super complex just makes it super unique as well. Back at Peach Mart, David Chang's place, here he's using lapchong sausage in his stuffing scoop that he serves during lunchtime. And, it's no secret, David Chang is a huge fan of umami-rich foods, and here he's sneaking stuff into his stuffing scoops. Back at Missy, here's a simple dish of grilled beets, but the lardo that they put on top of there, which is a cured pork fatback. So what you would think about with bacon, just that thick strip of fat, that's just cured fat that's melted over the top and enrobing these beets, but it's giving it that much more flavor. And then they're adding some balsamic vinegar and pink peppercorns as well to finish the dish off. At Intersect in New York, here they're cooking with schmaltz. We talked about fat, right? So chicken fat is something that's utilized here as an ingredient in their bread course. So where you can use it, use it. At Plato in New York City, here they've got some crostini, so boccherones, your marinated anchovies, and then they have andouille on the other side as a kind of a two-course crostini. So umami and umami crostinis. Plato here, they also have Spanish cured sausage that's with their garlic and fava beans. So really being specific using that there. Back at the Jones, here you can just get a whole plate of Serrano ham. So your Virginia dry cured ham as a side plate, and just picking it up and eating it as is and getting it with some bread or whatever you like. But just loads of flavor because it's dry cured and not wet brined. Back at Somerset, andouille comes into the fold here with the heirloom carrots. So just little bits of that included. You can crisp it up if you like. You can just put it in raw if you will. But either way, it's still going to have that complexity to make these carrots really stand out. Also at Somerset, dry-aged beef tartare. We talked about dry aging, right? But they also put it with shiitake mushrooms. So adding that, two of those components together is kind of a match made of umami heaven. And I added this in the fold as well. This is a restaurant, Breadlum in LA, but I saw these chips. I thought they were cool. You can get them these days pretty much anywhere, but They're Ibiriko Ham Chips, so a bag of chips that's seasoned with this Ibiriko ham flavor seasoning, which I thought was super unique. If you're gonna serve a side bag of chips, you might as well make it something like this, right? And then on to the last trending category of things that we've seen and come to our attention. And this is birria. This is something that we did a demo for the food show. So when you hop off of this, if you want to check out the demos, we do a demo on just this. And this is braised or stewed simmered beef, lamb, or goat. If it's Tijuana style, it's beef. That's what we chose to do. If it's Jalisco style, it's the lamb or goat. And Tijuana is what you're going to see 9 times out of 10 in the US. And it's based primarily on guajillo chilies or ancho and or pasilla chilies. And the way we made it was with guajillo because it is the tamest route. It doesn't have tons and tons of spiciness to it, but it gives it that brick red color. And what Teddy's does at Teddy's Red Tacos in LA, this is a place that we saw 2 years ago and has really exploded since then. And I give Teddy's all the credit to driving this trend starting 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago even. And what he does, he started off with a food truck and now he has 5 locations, is taking tacos, making his birria, what you see in the pot here that he's stirring. And he takes the tortilla, dips it into the birria broth after braising all this wonderful beef and putting that taco tortilla right on the flat top to crisp up the exterior and also give the tortilla a red color. And that's what this red taco craze has started with. But now you're seeing it well beyond tacos in lots of different scenarios, and just a wonderful way to showcase that as an ingredient. And we'll look at some of the examples. This is us outside of Teddy's. So, just a taco truck 2-3 years ago, and now he's really exploded since then, but you just never know what you're gonna find on research. And I tell you, this was at the cusp of what birria really is today, and I give him all the credit, like I said. This is what we had at his place. So his Tijuana style birria. On the left-hand side are cups of the birria in consomme. And consomme is typically known for a French clear soup. But in this sort of cuisine, it's all about the broth of what the birria is braised in. So this red, kind of brick red broth right there that has all this wonderful flavor, it is something that you can use as dipping for tortillas or used as eating out with just, the fork or spoon in the beef there, and just has loads and loads of flavor. And then this is what he does as well. This is a deluxe plate. Back in 2019, New York Times named this in the top 10 dishes of LA, this deluxe plate right here. So the taco truck that you witnessed that picture of that we went to is the top 10 dish that New York Times said in LA. That's crazy, right? But it's birria. I mean, it's a simple thing that he created, from his roots that he wanted to take out on the street and get people excited about. And this is what he turns it into, his kind of 4 renditions of using birria in a multitude of ways. But now we've seen it, break out into all different places. This is Peter's Crunchy Red Tacos in Brooklyn. A lot of food trucks since the pandemic had started, right? Comfort food, food that travels well, that's portable, things of that nature that people are looking for. Birria is an answer because it is portable, it is comfort food. You can use it in a multitude of different applications on your menu. And now we've seen it in all different variations. And so he's doing it more classic, just like Teddy. But then you get into stuff like Tata Tacos trying to do a vegetarian concept in Chicago, doing birria. And then places like here in Texas, they're doing it as a ramen concept. So you've got a little bowl here of ramen, doing that consomme broth that's included there. And then you're dunking it in, you're dunking the taco into the ramen broth with the ramen noodles in there. So it's really getting kind of crazy. But again, it's just to showcase how versatile you can utilize it, and the world is whatever you want it to be inside birria. This is my friend Adam Pollock in Milwaukee, who owns Egg and Flour Pasta. This is his Brie Ravioli. So this is a dish that I actually mimicked in one of the demos when we were doing handmade pastas. So you can check it out if you'd like to. And we're trying to showcase the versatility of birria, just like he was doing, using it as a filling of a ravioli. So just another way to cross-utilize in your menu, use it for all day parts, and it's good for all segments as well. And that ends this seminar. We appreciate your time. We also appreciate your business. Please check out the other seminars and our recipe demos within the virtual show site. And until next time, much continued success.